Walid Shoebat was once a Palestinian terrorist. Now he is a committed Christian and a friend of Israel. To hear the remarkable story of his conversion and his view of the present turmoil in the Middle East, stay tuned for Politics and Religion.
Look, there are two things I don't discuss: politics and religion.
In my house, we don't talk about politics and we don't talk about religion.
I'll talk to you about anything except politics and religion.
I never talk about politics and religion.
Politics determines how we'll live here on earth. Religion determines how we'll live forever. I'm Irvin Baxter. I think it's time we talk about it. The stories continue to come in from the Middle East. This article just today: in first Damascus firefight, 2 Syrian policemen, 15 demonstrators shot dead. It's like this revolution keeps sweeping, and you wonder, okay, what is behind it? Who is fueling it? Where will it end? Of course, Mr. Bashar Assad has continually been one of the prime movers in the Middle East. He is allied with Iran. He's also allied with Lebanon and Hezbollah, so it's very interesting to see what's going on. Our guest today is going to be Mr. Walid Shoebat, and he will be coming on with the program with us shortly. He was once a Palestinian terrorist, now a committed Christian, and so it's going to be very interesting to hear his story. Furthermore, he has written a book, God's War on Terror: Islam, Prophecy, and the Bible. So it's going to be very interesting to get Walid's insight into what is really going on there. I believe we have him on the program with us now. Hey, Walid, are you with us?
Yes, sir.
So nice to have you on Politics and Religion again. And I know that you've been on with us before. However, some of our listeners may not be familiar with you. I'd like for you to give us a brief overview of your testimony, what happened to you, how you started, and what happened in your life, if you would be so kind as to do that.
No problem. I was born by an American mother who visited the Middle East with my father. I was born the first day she arrived in Bethlehem, Israel, out of all places, and she was not permitted to go back to her country, the U.S. Of course, I grew up in the Middle East, in the Palestinian areas, and that basically creates an anti-Israel, anti-U.S. individual, basically because of the education and the mosque education. Of course, I started becoming a rebel rouser, lobbing stones at the worshippers at the Wailing Wall and getting into demonstrations and trouble, ended me in prison. And I was recruited in prison, of course, and planted a bomb in Israel, came to the U.S., was involved in the PLO, was disenfranchised with the PLO. I wanted something more puritanical, so I joined the Muslim Brotherhood. And in 1993, I began to examine the Bible to challenge my wife to convert her to Islam. And during that research I was doing, I ended up becoming Christian in 1993.
Okay, now, Walid, let me ask you a couple of questions, because what an interesting background. Now, was your mother, was she a Christian while she was there in Bethlehem?
Yes, she was a Christian, and she had a chance to witness to me a few times, in which she told me that I was on the wrong track. Of course, I didn't listen to my mother. My birth certificate said father Muslim, mother Christian, child Muslim. So the religion of the child, if there is a marriage involved between a Christian and a Muslim, it's usually a Muslim male, and the child has to become Muslim.
So was your dad, was your father a devout Muslim, or how was that?
Yes, he was very devout. He taught Islamic studies in school, and he was a fervent Muslim, and caused a lot of trouble. And so, yes, of course, my whole family was Muslim. In fact,
I've been to Bethlehem many times, and am I right to assume that you actually grew up during your childhood in Bethlehem?
Yes, sir. I grew up till I became 18, came to the U.S.
Okay, very interesting. Now, I was especially interested when you talked about ultimately joining the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, is the Muslim Brotherhood actually active in areas like Bethlehem and throughout the Palestinian territories? Are they active right now?
Absolutely. They were active even when I was there during the 70s. They were active. Both my Islamic studies teacher, Sheikh Naim Ayyad, Sheikh Zakaria, were both graduates from Al-Azhar University and promoted Muslim Brotherhood agenda in the school. So some argue and say, well, the Muslim Brotherhood wasn't active. That's not true. It was very active. You had also before that, Hizb al-Tahrir was active in the Islamist movement. There's always been a presence of activism of Muslim Brotherhood. The Sharia schools in Jerusalem was all pro-Muslim Brotherhood. And a lot of the teachers and the educators were graduates from Al-Azhar University of Egypt.
So let me make sure I understand, because I'm sure if I have the question, a lot of our listeners do as well. So you've got Hezbollah, you've got Hamas, you've got the Muslim Brotherhood, and then we've got Al-Qaeda. Can you sort of tie all that together for us?
Well, Hezbollah is a faction of the Iranian revolution, and because of its connection with Syria, and Hezbollah is in Lebanon. The Al-Qaeda, Hamas, were both born from the Muslim Brotherhood. They were both as a result of the Muslim Brotherhood being the cartel in the region. The Muslim Brotherhood is probably the largest Islamic movement, started in 1928, which gave birth to all these terrorist organizations. Of course, the Muslim Brotherhood currently does not get involved in the explosive act, in the terrorist act itself. However, the organizations that have been born from it, by far, have been active in terrorism and plotting terrorism, like Al-Qaeda and Hamas. In fact, the Council of American Islamic Relations is a branch of Hamas that we deal with today, trying to paint itself as a peaceful organization. Many of its members were involved in terror activity and financiering of terrorism.
Well, it's interesting to see what has happened in Egypt recently, and I know the Muslim Brotherhood is very strong in the land of Egypt. So why did the United States back so strongly the demonstrators and pull the rug out from under Mr. Hosni Mubarak? What was the thinking there? Was it right thinking? Was it wrong thinking? What's your opinion about that?
Well, you see some studies by groups headed by Madeleine Albright and things like that in the past, where they began to look at what they thought was the moderate Muslim Brotherhood. In other words, if you can't beat them, join them and hope that they moderate. So the Muslim Brotherhood, as a result of the Iranian Revolution and as a result of Al-Qaeda and the 9/11 fiascos, they began to seem to act as they're dormant. They're not involved in the terrorist activity, and they began to paint themselves as a moderate Muslim movement. And this is why you look at their website in the English language. The logo on their website is freedom, one English word. But in the Arabic website, it's the word wa'iddu. Wa'iddu means prepare. And the logo is from the Quran. وَأَعِدُّ لَهُمْ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُم مِّنْ عِدَّةٍ وَمِنْ رِبَاطِ الْخَيْلِ تُرْهِبُونَ عَدَوَّ اللَّهِ وَأَعْدَاءَكُمْ. This is Arabic. Prepare for them of military strength to terrorize Allah's enemy and your enemy. Terrorize, military. So while in the Arabic language they basically show their true colors, when they talk to Der Spiegel, they seem to say something else. You look at somebody like Rashad al-Bayoumi, one leader in the Muslim Brotherhood. He says that we want peace, to Der Spiegel, not violence. Our religion is not demonic, so on and so forth. Yet you look at the Arabic language in Al-Sharqiyya online, he talks about basically even making the Copts illegitimate in the country, emphasizing on Section 2, Article 2 of the Constitution, which talks about Sharia law, that Sharia is part and parcel of the British government system. You look at Badi'. Badi' says that Osama bin Laden is a mujahid. Mujahid, in elevating him to a status of jihadi, a righteous person. You look at Mustafa Mashhur, and he says jihad is not only for the purpose of fending off assaults and attacks of Allah's enemies from Muslims, but are also for the purpose of realizing the great task of establishing an Islamic state. Hello? what part of Islamic State people don't get, and strengthening the religion and spreading it around the world. So, you have to look at what they're saying in the Arabic language and not what they're saying in the English language. Of course, Sheikh Qaradawi, Yusuf al-Qaradawi, the liaison, the international liaison of the Muslim Brotherhood, was a spokesperson on the Day of Victory in Egypt. What were 2 million Egyptians chanting on Day of Victory in Tahrir Square? They were chanting in the Arabic language, Al-Quds Rayhin Shuhada bil-Malayin, which means, to Jerusalem we march, martyrs by the millions. What news media reported that? And why are these people chanting to Jerusalem we march, martyrs by the million? What does that have to do with the Egyptian revolution? So the movement is quite easily, showing in the Arabic language, and I monitor the Arabic, of course, that the intent really is to infiltrate the West and basically paint themselves as a moderate Islamic organization when they're not.
So the revolution that took place in Egypt, do you expect the Muslim Brotherhood to end up in control of Egypt?
Absolutely. Yes, in fact, even the New York Times had an article talking about this issue. We have the youth is really out of the picture. We've seen the youth. Americans were all fascinated by the Twitter boy, Facebook boy, Wa'il Ghunaim. What happened to him on the day of making a speech on Victory Day? He was ousted out of the platform, and Yusuf al-Qaradawi replaced him. And what did he say? He said, "Don't allow no one to rob you from your revolution," when in reality the Muslim Brotherhood just robbed it. So it is, there is no real Western-style call for democracy in the Middle East. This is simply wishful thinking. I'm not a wishful thinker, I'm a realist. And reality is telling us that the elderly are taking over in Egypt, and we will see soon when everything settles and that Islamism will be part and parcel of this whole system, because al-Baradei could not even spark a revolution without throwing his lot with the Muslim Brotherhood. This is a fact. He would have never done anything unless the Muslim Brotherhood came on the march, and it was after the Friday prayers that the gist of the whole revolution really began. So it's a lie, and it's dishonest for the media to try to portray the revolution in Egypt as simply the youth of Egypt and all these things, although there is some truth to the fact that there are many Egyptians who want a real change in Egypt, but the reality is that the powerhouse is in the hands of the Muslim Brotherhood.
We've got a break in about a minute, Walid, but before we hit that break, can you explain the relationship between the Muslim Brotherhood and Iran? Are they allies? Are they enemies? Where does that stand?
Well, they're not allies, neither they're enemies. There's little communication between the two. There is the communication between the Wahhabists as well as the Muslim Brotherhood. The Wahhabists in Saudi Arabia, in fact, when the Muslim Brotherhood was exiled, they joined the Wahhabists over there in Saudi Arabia. They collectively worked together. However, there is an association between Hamas and Hezbollah, in which Hamas is born from the Muslim Brotherhood, receives monies from Iran, and you've seen them during the Lebanese-Israeli fiasco. Hezbollah would carry flags of Hamas, and Hamas will carry the flags of Hezbollah. So they will unite when it comes to the issue of Israel. At the same rate, they have hatred towards each other, and an animosity that stems from the historic division between the Shia and...
Okay, we're up against the break, Walid, so we'll be right back in just a moment.
Endtime Ministries presents End of the Age, a 30-minute commercial-free TV show hosted by Irvin Baxter. Every Monday, End of the Age airs on the Church Channel at 9 p.m., Daystar at 10 p.m., and on TBN every Wednesday morning at 7 a.m., all Central Standard Time. On End of the Age, Irvin depicts how modern issues like an establishment of a one-world government, the religion of Islam, a coming World War III, and more line up so clearly with Bible prophecies written over 2,000 years ago. To get tomorrow's news today, be sure to tune into End of the Age every Monday on the Church Channel at 9 p.m., Daystar at 10 p.m., and on TBN every Wednesday morning at 7 a.m., all Central Standard Time. Visit endtime.com for more details or call us at 1-800-ENDTIME. That's 1-800-363-8463.
The Bible